It is 1:30 Universal Time. I'm Jim Tedder in Washington. Americans are marking the 5th anniversary of the deadly attacks on the United States. On September 11, 2001, Al-Qaeda hijackers seized 4 passenger airplanes. They flew 3 of them into buildings in New York and a building near Washington. The 4th crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. President Bush and his wife visited all 3 places. In New York City, they joined firefighters and policemen mourning at a fire station. Family members of thousands of victims took part in a ceremony at the place where the World Trade Center buildings stood. Services were also held at the Pentagon, the headquarters for the United States military. Mr. Bush and Ms. Bush also went to Shanksville and met with family members of victims. The attacks killed nearly 3,000 people within a few hours. A leader of Al-Qaeda has warned that the Persian Gulf area and Israel will be its next targets. Ayman al-Zawahiri made the threats in a video recording. It was broadcast on Monday, the 5th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks in the United States. Mr. al-Zawahiri said militants should target Western economic interests. He accused Western powers of stealing what he called Muslim oil. The Al-Qaeda leader also said the United Nations peacekeeping force in Lebanon is hostile to Islam. American Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice says Iran must stop processing uranium before negotiations can begin on its nuclear program. She says there must be proof of the suspension. Ms. Rice spoke during a visit to Canada on Monday. Earlier, top American diplomat George Schulte welcomed progress at the talks between Iran and the European Union. But he says the United States will still push for restrictions against Iran if it does not stop enriching uranium. Iraqi officials say Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki is set to visit Iran on Tuesday. He plans to meet with Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Mr. al-Maliki was to have visited Tehran on Monday, but an Iraqi official says the trip was delayed for technical reasons. In Baghdad Monday, an attacker exploded a bomb near a bus carrying new Iraqi soldiers. At least 14 people and the attacker were killed. Several people were wounded. Also in Baghdad, the trial of former Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein and 6 other men continues. Saddam Hussein is accused of ordering the killing of tens of thousands of Iraqi Kurds in 1988. A former Kurdish rebel told the court about a chemical weapons attack on her village. You are listening to the news in VOA Special English. A 6-day conference of the non-aligned movement has opened in Havana. Cuban Foreign Minister Felipe Pérez Roque says the group is now more necessary than ever. He called on member nations to unite against threats. Mr. Pérez Roque criticized the increased pressure by the United States and its allies on Iran to end its nuclear program. 116 countries are members of the non-aligned movement. It was formed more than 40 years ago by nations that did not want to ally with the United States, nor with the Soviet Union in the Cold War. Cuba is replacing Malaysia as the leader of the movement. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas says an agreement has been reached with the Hamas organization to form a new unity government. Palestinian leaders say they hope the new government will lead Western nations to end economic restrictions against Hamas. American, European, and Israeli leaders have refused to work with Hamas because it has refused to recognize Israel and reject violence. News reports say the new agreement includes proposals that would suggest recognition of Israel. In Israel, a court has found a Jewish settler guilty of murdering 4 Palestinians last year. They all worked together in a factory in the West Bank. American Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice says she has urged Sudan to accept a United Nations peacekeeping force. She met with the Sudanese foreign minister in Washington on Monday. After the meeting, Ms. Rice said she spoke in the strongest way possible. She said relations between the United States and Sudan will not improve unless Sudan cooperates with the UN. In New York, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan warned Sudan that its military attacks in Darfur violate a recent peace agreement. The Sudanese government signed an agreement with one rebel group in May. The chief negotiator of the Ugandan peace talks says a rebel leader has arrived at a neutral camp in southern Sudan. Vincent Oti is second in command in the Lord's Resistance Army. The Sudanese negotiator says hundreds of rebels also have gathered at 2 neutral camps. Rebel leader Joseph Kony is also expected there. The move is part of a truce agreement with the Ugandan government. The top United Nations humanitarian official, Yon Egeland, is in the southern Sudanese city of Juba to help with the Ugandan peace talks. He said the UN would give humanitarian support to the rebels at the camps. A powerful ocean storm has struck the Caribbean island of Bermuda. The storm is known as Hurricane Florence. It has caused thousands of homes and businesses to lose power. The Bermudian government says there are no immediate reports of injuries or deaths. The latest weather report said the center of the storm was about 300 kilometers north of Bermuda. Weather officials expect the hurricane to become weaker overnight. And now, briefly, here again is the major news of the hour. Americans are marking the 5th anniversary of the Al-Qaeda attacks on the United States. President Bush has just made a speech to the nation. He has called on Americans to work together against terrorism. The President said extremists are fighting to prevent a democratic future. And a leader of Al-Qaeda says the Persian Gulf area and Israel will be the group's next targets. And that's the news in VOA Special English. From Washington, This is Jim Tedder reporting.